Sometimes when I watch these videos of people going back to play older games, albeit more popular ones like Gears of War, Uncharted, Halo, Killzone, etc., I generally hear from a big portion of these people, not all of them, but a good few, that these games have, quote, not aged well. And this really perplexes me because I remember these games and playing them back then when they were new, and also going back to play some of these games now. And besides just a few outliers, most of these games I wouldn't categorize as hasn't aged well. Sometimes the visual quality isn't as impressive as you once thought, or sometimes the game has certain grindy levels or portions of the levels that just make that particular segment very frustrating to play. But the overall experience I have had going back to play many of these games, and if you're subscribed to the channel, you know I produce a lot of these videos. The general experience I have is that these games are more than playable to this day. They have aged well, and while they may not be instant classics, some of them do actually become better with age. They're more engaging, they're just more interesting to play. Their narratives, the gameplay styles just really transform into something super refreshing and just, indicative of games that are not being made anymore. The bottom line is, I feel quite comfortable saying that the vast majority of games that I've replayed and talked about on this channel, from this era specifically, mind you, are quite playable, and I think that if any one of you were to go back and play any one of these games, you would also find it just as fun and engaging as I did, even if you never had a prior relationship with the game itself. So the reason I wanted to preface that in this video today is because I wanted to talk about a game that actually hasn't aged quite well. And that's this one we're watching right here. This is The Godfather, the game on the Xbox 360, playing on its original hardware here. This is not backwards compatible on the brand new Series X machine, so you do need an original Xbox 360 and the disc itself to play this game. Also, it is available on the PlayStation 3, and it is a cross-generation game, so you can even get it on the 6th generation systems. Now, let me be clear here. This isn't a bad game. Just because I say it hasn't aged well doesn't mean the game is bad or unplayable by any means. What I mean by this is that there are certain pacing and structure issues to the core gameplay of this experience that doesn't fit quite well with what you may be used to, even from games of the same era around this time frame. Now, this is a cross-generation game. It was released on both 6th and 7th generation systems, but there are some design and fundamental gameplay issues here that do hamper the overall enjoyment of the experience if you were to go back and play this game today. In this video series, I do make an active effort to make sure I try as best as I possibly can to critique these games, not just on how playable they are today, but rather the impact that they would have had back when they were new, and also compare them to other notable releases during their time. The Godfather game is a retelling of the original film, The Godfather, with a slight twist in that you play as your own custom character, going through the ranks, earning a reputation, and basically playing alongside the events that would happen in the film. Now, if you will forgive me for embarrassing myself here just for a moment, I have actually never seen the Godfather movies. No, I'm actually not kidding. I do own all of these movies on 4K Blu-ray, but I haven't actually sat down and watched any of them yet. And it was just one of those films that sort of escaped me. Being that I am a 90s kid, I also don't know if my parents would have felt comfortable letting me watch it at an early age, and I probably wouldn't have been able to fully appreciate the subject matter back then either, so the time will eventually come when I do sit down and watch the entire series, preferably when I build my complete theater setup in my own place, but that's besides the point here. So because of this, I can't actually provide you an accurate assessment of the game experience and how it compares to the events that take place in the film, but I do know there are a few scenes here where they completely re-render the events of the movie scene by scene, but for the most part the story is sort of built around your personal character interacting with these larger characters from the film and doing jobs, taking over territory, and such that. Now, that being said, I was able to follow through with the narrative in simpler terms. I don't think it quite succeeds in delivering a consistent story with deep character development, Rather, you're just sort of completing these missions until it hits the next major event in the films. At least that's how it felt to me, but your mileage may vary if you do have an actual relationship with the movies and are going into this game. So it is quite forgettable in that regard, but on the flip side, it is cool to be part of this world in a deeper way, living through the mobster lifestyle and talking with these characters, seeing a different perspective compared to the films. So before we continue here, let's take a look at the Godfather, the game box art on Xbox 360. I think they tried to mimic the look of the original VHS/DVD when that came out. So you got nice simple box art there, cool spine, and then on the back we have a nice big picture of New York saying welcome to the family, and various different screenshots here, showing the full cast, some action. Taking a look inside here, we got a lot of cool stuff. So the game disc is nice and clean. I like the lettering with the simple black, and it's a nice clean copy of the game, so great for preservation. And then really cool with this physical edition of the game, this is just a standard version, they gave you an actual map. So this is very much like, Grand Theft Auto, where you pick up a physical copy of that game to give you a map of, the entire city where it takes place. You got a whole, version of the game map here, which folds out, it's a fairly good size. And you got a lot of different landmarks and information. And then on the back here, we got the whole family tree showing just the titles and rankings of all the different people in the mob, which is just really cool to see. I'm really happy that this came with my, version of the game here. So awesome to have that, but we also get a full game manual with this as well. It is black and white. So as you're going to see as we kind of flip through here, I actually think it quite fits with the actual film itself. Although it wasn't, done in black and white, it's sort of kind of the era, if you were to say. So pretty cool, and just different information on weapons, the game screen, pause menu, how the actual, businesses and structure of the gameplay work, all the different cool things like that. So you actually do get some nice, stuff with the actual game. It's not just a simple disc and a manual. It's nice that they included the map. So cool look at the box art. Now let me get back to the subject matter of aging with this game. The main issue here is control. Now, most of the games I mentioned prior, which people have a tendency to call poorly aged, still play fine, and I think match a general control scheme that most modern games still adapt from today. But here we have something a bit different. The Godfather at its core is a third-person open-world shooter. You can steal cars, drive to different districts of New York, talk to business owners, gun down rival mobs, police civilians, and just basically do whatever you want. The gunplay in this game plays like one of those titles where you have to lock onto the enemies first and then hold down the fire button to engage in combat. It's a bit hard for me to think about another game I recently reviewed which has a similar style to this, but this combat system is from the early 2000s, and many developers back then were still trying to understand how to create a good feeling third-person shooter. Now, to further add obstacles with the combat, you also don't have the best camera control here when it comes to engaging these foes. The camera has a tendency to follow the character's direction, and it's not really freestanding, so this results in very rapid, jittery motion when moving your character in any other direction other than forward. And this is just exacerbated further in close quarters situations, which you will have to participate in from time to time. I think this combat engine actually feels a bit better to play if you're running and gunning as opposed to trying to play this like a cover shooter, because you can simply lock on to enemies and run around, and yes, you do put yourself in more harm's way as a result of this, but at least the enemies do react fairly quickly to being shot at. So that means they're not just going to be standing there getting bullets pumped into them saying, "Ow, that hurts," while continuing to fire at you at the same time. Again, me saying this does not equate to bad gameplay. It's simply a byproduct of the era that this game belongs to. And by definition and personal experience, it is removed to how you would expect modern games to play today, hence the game not aging well. But despite all of this, I was able to get through the game and complete the entire campaign on my own. Now, when I first started playing this game, I was immediately concerned because part of the core gameplay is you needing to take over rival territories. Now, I played many games in the past where you have this sort of slog of progression due to a requirement to complete boring, tedious, repetitive tasks over and over and over again that add just nothing in the way of enjoyment and are purely there to pad the length of the experience. However, while you do have to do that during certain moments in this game, it never felt to me that it was sort of overdone. Like, they asked you to do the basic bare minimum stuff of that nature, but never sort of pushed beyond that, saying it's there if you want to spend more time in it, but it's not required to actually progress to the end of the game. In the end, I was able to get through The Godfather, the game, in about 15 hours, so it doesn't sort of overstay its welcome. It gets a bit poorly paced in between, but you're not really expected to spend a lot of time here, so all is well in that regard. Now, graphically, let's keep this in mind. It is a cross-generation game. On the Xbox 360, you do get a much nicer presentation with cleaner textures, a busier population and streets, and overall just a more lively environment. That being said, it's not a looker by today's standards, and it absolutely looks its age. Unfortunately, as well, we don't exactly get an optimized frame rate here either. As I mentioned before, this game is not backwards compatible on the Xbox Series X, so you must play this game on original hardware in order to experience it. We have a game here that targets 30 frames per second, but has frequent dips into the 20s. In fact, long stretches of gameplay actually hang in the 25 to 30 range, and I've even seen frame rate dip into the teens at worst case scenario. While this is annoying and definitely noticeable when you're playing, it more so adds to the frustration with the controls, and it makes some segments much more difficult than they really are. I wouldn't say it's another Quake 4 launch game situation, but I have noticed this one being one of the more poor performers of titles released during this first year of the 7th generation era. Now, touching briefly on the music, this is also fairly good. They do take some cues from the movie, of course, so it does feel like it belongs to the franchise and it's not just some outside force attempting to mimic the classics. The voice acting here is also pretty good, and I'm pretty sure they simply lifted the dialogue from the films and placed it in the game. Some of the dialogue actually has this sort of old tinty sound to it. Like they just ripped off what was on the DVD or whatever, but your main character does actually do a pretty good job, though. He is voice, and he kind of reminds me of a more poorly written version of Vito Scaletta from Mafia 2. So to close here, The Godfather, the game, is, well, just that. I don't think the game does anything particularly special to add to the Godfather license. It is at least more than just a cash grab movie tie-in experience, and does try to stand out a bit more by sort of channeling Grand Theft Auto and the Mafia franchise. But the controls do get in the way of enjoyment when going back to play this game today, and the frame rate can be brutal at times, but just generally underperforms. And overall, this game never quite reaches the impact I think that the films had. In fact, if you are a fan of the films and you did play this game, I would like to know exactly if you think it's worthy of more credit than I can give it. It is definitely made for that particular audience, and the drama is admittedly lost on me when I haven't even seen the source material it's reflecting, so I need to get my butt in a seat and watch a trilogy of films in their new 4K master. That's going to be epic. When that day comes, I'll update you all on Twitter, but for now, I hope you guys enjoyed this reminiscing video, and see you for the next one. Thank you very much.